Hi, it's Kenny here. I'm sitting in the most lovely hotel beside a roaring fire, having my dinner. I'm working in the Cotswolds at the minute and staying in a place called the Bird in Hand. And I've been listening, while I've been having my dinner, I've been listening to some 70s guitar rock or guitar solos, shall I say, from all different genres. And I decided when I get back to my bedroom, I'm going to do a little video on my favourite guitar solos from the 1970s. Now, I've got no right to be really doing this, to be fair, because I don't play guitar, I play piano, but I know what I like, and hopefully you'll agree with some of my choices as well. It was a phenomenal time for music, and some of the guitar playing was just phenomenal. Some phenomenal players, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail as we get into the video. Okay, we'll see you in a minute. So, guys, I'm back in my bedroom and ready to do this mega video for you about the great guitar players from the 1970s. And why I think that it was the best era for guitar players. In fact, it's the best era for music, full stop. The reason I'm doing it is because when I was driving here tonight, I was listening to one of my favourite YouTubers, Andy Edwards. And Andy was doing a video about the 1980s guitar shredders. And I have to be honest with you, I absolutely hated the 1980s guitar shredders. It was just noise to me. It was just technical, showing off like that. And I never got into it. I never enjoyed the music. I found it, in some cases, quite unlistenable. And it got me thinking about the difference between the 70s guitar music and what came after that, I mean, Andy's great. I absolutely love Andy to bits. He's a really, my God, he's really knowledgeable. He really knows his stuff. I mean, it's all up there with him. I'm like, how does he remember all that stuff? How's he seen all that stuff? But the one thing about Andy is Andy's 10 years younger than me. So what Andy did is Andy came into music in the 80s. His guitar playing was influenced, or he started to listen to music and buy music in the 80s by the shredders. And then what happened is he then found the really good music through that, the Zeps and Sabbath and all that kind of stuff, and jazz fusion and jazz. He found that after hearing that first. And so he's into that kind of thing. And I've got to tell you that I'm not into that thing at all. And the only other thing I disagree with Andy about is the prog thing. I love jazz fusion, I love jazz, but apart from the kind of major kind of Pink Floyd and Yes and stuff like that, I really couldn't abide like Rush. That guy's voice, Geddy Lee, just so annoying. Squeaky voice. And who else? John Anderson. Now I did enjoy the classic Yes albums. The Yes album, Close to the Edge, Fragile, all that kind of stuff. I liked that, right? But his voice always kind of grated just a wee bit. I like a more kind of bluesy, soul-y, deep rock voice rather than the wee squeaky kind of stuff that was happening in the prog front. So I kind of miss prog a wee bit. But anyway, that's enough of that. To get back to it, when I got into the hotel tonight, I sat in the dining room having my dinner, and I started to think a little bit about other guitarists from the 70s that I love and all the solos that I love. And what I'd like to do is just kind of go through some of the kind of leading players of the 70s for anybody that wasn't around in the 70s and doesn't know these guys. Hopefully it'll be an introduction, and it might get you listening to some of the music, because it's pretty sensational stuff. I mean, if you look before that, let's look at the history. So you've got in the 50s, you've got the kind of advent of rock and roll and skiffle, and it was at that point that the electric guitar started to become a fairly important instrument in music, contemporary music. We had people like Chuck Berry, who, you know, was just one of the best riffers. He just played some of the most incredible riffs, and it was really joyful, kind of, you know, riff-based music. It was fantastic. And then we had Scotty Moore with Elvis's lot, you know, playing with Elvis, and Scotty was a great guitar player as well, and he brought an element of country and blues into Elvis's music. And then the kind of rock and roll thing really kind of took off. And then there was, I guess the easiest way to describe it is, we had the British invasion, didn't we? So we had the Beatles and the Stones and other bands who kind of took over the world in the mid-60s. And some great guitar playing as well, I have to say. But in the late 60s, one man came along and absolutely revolutionised guitar playing forever, and that was Jimi Hendrix. And, you know, for Jimmy's short life, you have to say that he produced a shed load of work, and he introduced effects and wah-wah and playing behind the back, and it was unbelievable what Hendrix did. Influenced a whole, you know, generation of guitar players after him. Phenomenal. And then, of course, when the blues rock British thing happened, you know, when they took that black American music, and then these white guys, specifically from the UK, started to play like Beck and Clapton and Page. You know, they really took it to a new level, that whole blues rock thing, and that was up until the kind of late 60s. But when we look at the 70s, we then had the advent of the real rockers. We had the advent of the Black Sabbaths, the Led Zeppelins, the Deep Purples, Uriah Heep. They're just a whole load of incredible hard rock bands. It was the first real heavy metal music, and it was absolutely incredible. Elements of the blues in there, obviously, elements of psychedelia, but just taking it to another level, absolutely. And then in the late 70s, Eddie Van Halen, of course, he then just blew everybody's mind. He just came along and ways, different technique, he's tapping and the speed, and he blew the minds of so many guitar players. And then, of course, we got to the punk rock thing. And in the punk rock thing, it was pared right down again to kind of sparse, raw, aggressive licks and solos, and it was an incredible time, really, fighting against the establishment, you know, fighting against the yeses and the progressive kind of guys and the kind of long drawn out solos. And some of the playing was definitely raw, but was very, very exciting at the same time. So I really loved the punk period. And then came the stuff that Andy was talking about, the shredding. And I mean, I don't even know half of these guys. I mean, I know Stevie Vai, I know Satriani and people like that, but I really don't know. He was mentioning loads of guys, and it's just not my thing at all. Too technical, not that listenable for me. You know, I want a tune. I like a tune, you know. And I just didn't find it very tuneful. Now, on saying that, guys, don't get me wrong, one of my favourite bands is the Vienna Art Orchestra. And if you listen to the Vienna Art Orchestra, it's just a bloody noise, but I love it, right? It's pure jazz, big band, right? So I kind of do like that stuff, but I just did not get on with that, you know, the 1980s metal at all. And then we had stuff like Rage Against the Machine, and then they were quite experimental, you know, and that kind of stuff, which, yeah, I quite liked some of the Rage of the Machine stuff, I have to say. And then horrible stuff like the mixed in with like hip hop, Limp Bizkit and people like that, which I was not particularly, I didn't particularly like. And then it's kind of all died since then, because we then had like indie rock, right? And we had absolute crap like, you know, Coldplay and people, anyway, indie bands, I don't even know half of them, right? But for me, it disappeared. The fact that in the 70s we had heroes. We went out and bought the albums and played them to bits and loved them. And, you know, we all had favourite guitar players and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen now. They're just kind of these anonymous kind of bands, you know. And then you've got, I guess, the players of today, the players who people know and who would buy CDs or stream would be people like maybe Jack White or John Mayer, they're both extremely good players, but for me, it's nothing compared to the stuff that happened in the 70s. So I'm going to keep harping on about the 70s because it was unbelievably good. This is not gin, by the way. It's actually sparkling water. I'm on a bit of a diet at the minute. See if I can get myself a bit fitter. So that was that. So that's a kind of brief kind of history of what's happened since the 50s up to now. In fact, it's got worse. It's got worse because I keep seeing things like these Instagram guys, like brilliant. Don't get me wrong, they're like technically brilliant, right? But all they're doing is they just play the same fucking thing over and over and over again. And every time you listen to one of them, you're going, that's the same guy, but it's somebody different, but they sound exactly the same. And there again, there's no soul, there's no passion. They're not playing in a band. It's not, you know, a guitar player used to be somebody who was so integral to the band, to the rock and roll or the jazz band, whoever they were in. And these guys are just playing. And like you're watching this going, yeah, so what? So no interest in that whatsoever. I just do not get it, really. What's the point in just playing a solo over a backing track? I just can't even see really what the point is. Anyway, so let's get on with some of my favourite guitar players and some of my favourite solos. I don't know how many there is, I've not counted, but some of my favourite solos from the 1970s. So let's start off with somebody that everybody knows and everybody loves, Jimmy Page. So Led Zeppelin, phenomenal band, first album 1969. Page before that, by the way, Page was one of the top session guys in the UK. He was playing up to 4 sessions a day with everybody from Tom Jones to The Who. Incredible gamut of work that he's actually, I don't actually know how many tracks he's played on, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And then of course he teamed up with Robert Plant back in the late 60s and formed one of the most iconic rock bands in the world. And I guess there's not going to be any huge surprise on this, and it's a bit obvious, and I'm sorry about that, but I still think that one of Page's greatest solos, greatest thing is Stairway to Heaven. I think it's a phenomenally beautiful, controlled, precise, relaxed and smooth solo, and it's utterly gorgeous. In fact, you know, the song is magnificent. It really is. It's a classic. You know, we know that it's a classic. But what's really interesting, do you think it would be recorded today, or do you think it would be given any time of day today because of the length of it and the length of the intro and the instrumentation that's used on it and all that kind of stuff? I'm not entirely sure whether it would, because today's music is utter crap. And you know, great music, there's not a lot of space in the space for great music like this. So it's incredible to think that they could have recorded this now and it would have been a flop. I don't know. Anyway, it's a wonderful track. Page is a phenomenal guitar player. But I once got a bootleg tape from their comeback gig in London. And it was the day before they played. It was the rehearsal. They played the whole show as a rehearsal. And I remember I got sent the CD by the engineer, the sound man, a brilliant guy who now has sadly passed, a guy called John Ramsey. And John sent me this tape, and he sent me a message with it, and he says, "Don't you ever tell anybody about this." I'm thinking, hang on a minute here, I'm just doing that. Don't tell anybody about this. He says, because if Pagey finds out, he will absolutely kill me. So I kept it really quiet. I've still got the CD somewhere, and it's pretty good. But they just play it straight. There's no, they just play the set straight. So it's not that great in the sense of it's a nice historical document, but it's not that great because there's no crowd noise, there's no atmosphere. So the guys are obviously just going through the motions of the whole set that they've done. But anyway, that's another story. John's passed now, so he can't get into any trouble. Pagey might come knocking on my door to see if he can get the tape back, but yeah, he's not getting it. So let's go on to somebody else who's absolutely legendary guitar player, and that would be Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple. And that was my band. Me and my boys, Deep Purple. We used to go and buy all the albums, sit in our bedrooms, listen to the albums over and over and over and over again. And I loved every reiteration. I loved every version of Deep Purple. I particularly loved the funky stuff at the end. I particularly loved the stuff when like Stormbringer and Come Taste the Band with Tommy Bolin and that kind of stuff. But I still think the legendary solo must be Highway Star from Machine Head. I absolutely love it. However, I love the version from Made in Japan even more. There was such an energy in that band at that time. And Made in Japan is probably the greatest double live album, rock album ever made. It's peerless. It's absolutely, to this day, it's absolutely phenomenal. The power, the inventiveness, the play between Gillan and Blackmore on guitar on some of the tracks, and everything about it, just the gatefold sleeve, oh my God, it's just the most fabulous thing. And I still occasionally give it a spin, and just absolutely love it. Who's next? Let's go for Iommi. Let's go for Tony Iommi. So again, at the same time as Deep Purple were doing their stuff, so was Black Sabbath. They're all from the same era, these guys. And I think Iommi, although he was a brilliant lead guitar player, solo-wise, I just think he was like one of the kings of the riff use. Some of the riffs that Black Sabbath came out with were just so hard and rocking. They were absolutely brilliant. So, funnily enough, I was never as into Black Sabbath as I was into Purple, and I think that was to do with Ozzy. I never got on that well with Ozzy's voice, right? And I know people love it and they're going to hate me for this, right? But it's never got on that well with Ozzy's voice. But still, we listened and I bought the albums and all the rest of it. And my favourite Iommi track is from Paranoid. And it's the solo on, which is the debut album, of course, it's the solo on Iron Man. And I absolutely love it. He could riff like nobody else, Tony Iommi. Absolutely brilliant. So next on the list, Eddie Van Halen. So Eddie changed the world. He changed the world. So he changed the world of guitar playing in the same kind of way as Hendrix did a decade on. The track Eruption, which everybody knows, everybody regards as one of the greatest solos that's ever been played. It's 1 minute and 40 seconds long, and it's 1 minute and 40 seconds of the most blistering guitar. It's just magnificent. And I guess what happened was, I guess Eddie, he stuck a red hot poker up all the other guitarists' arses, right? And made them really sit up and take notice. But again, Van Halen fans, I'm sorry for this. For me, the first album and Van Halen 2, which I think was 1979, were masterpieces, were absolutely fantastic. But once we got into the 80s, it just got too plastic and commercialised and kind of mellow for me, to be honest with you. Particularly after Dave Lee Roth, it's easy for you to say, Dave Lee Roth left and Sammy came in. Now, I loved Sammy's voice and all the rest of it. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, there's one. You know, Jesus, that just came to me, right? This is what happens when you do these lists, because then suddenly you get this bang, right, why have I missed that out, right? So I'm going to mention it, right? And we'll maybe play it as well. We'll see what happens. I mentioned Sammy, and then, of course, immediately I mentioned Sammy, I thought of Montrose. And Ronnie Montrose. I've not got Ronnie on this list. Ronnie was an absolute phenomenal player. And I'll be honest with you, the debut album by Montrose is one of the greatest rock albums ever made. It's certainly the greatest debut rock album. It's fantastic, and it's proper, in-your-face rock. And it really does give you your heart's pumping when you listen to it. It's so damn good. So there's another one, Ronnie Montrose, from the album. But we'll play a bit of Eruption just now, and then we'll maybe play a little bit of from the Montrose album as well. So there we go. That's an added bonus. I guess we cannot do a list like this of the greatest solos of the 1970s without mentioning Clapton. You know, of course, Clapton recorded one of the greatest blues albums ever, which was the John Mayall Blues Breakers Beano album. That's a classic album. If anybody's not heard it, you must pick that album up and listen to it. It's stunning, stunning blues. And that was back in, I think that was 66 or something that was recorded. I'm not entirely sure. And then he came through the 70s and started to do some solo stuff. So he played with Delaney and Bonnie. He played with Cream, of course. And then as he came into the 70s, I think he released in 1970s first debut album, which was a self-titled album. There was so many things that I could have picked. Like, so Blues in A from that first album, that Eric Clapton album, it's an 8-minute blues. And it's just so beautiful and relaxed and smooth. And it's such a gorgeous 8 minutes of pure joy, right? But I've decided that my favourite solo is from the Keys to the Highway, and that's from Layla and Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominoes, which, you know, was for me was a great double album. and there's a brilliant blues solo by Clapton in this. Now, in recent years, it's kind of went downhill a little bit for me, but a lot of these guys do. Can I tell you something as well? I saw Clapton 3 times. I've seen Clapton now. So twice was in the 70s, and one was at Hyde Park a few years ago. It was a very good show, actually. I must say, I rather enjoyed it. But the twice we saw him in Glasgow at the Apollo, which is epic place to go and see a gig, right? But the twice that we saw him in Glasgow, he was in his drug stage, man. He was as high as a kite. First time he was supported by Ronnie Lane, Slim Chance, who were extremely good. And the second time, wait till we hear this. There's a story. The second time he was supported by Mr. Pugh's Puppet Theatre. It's a classic gig. People still talk about this gig because literally, and I kid you not, right, that Mr. Pugh's Puppet Theatre was not the name of a band. Mr. Pugh's Puppet Theatre was a puppet theatre, right? And they had it set up in the middle of the stage, and Mr. Pugh was up doing his puppets, right? And like nobody in the crowd knew what was happening. But what was hilarious, because the Glasgow crowds they're fantastic, right? So when he went off, everybody's like booing, right? And then when Clapton came on, everybody was shouting for Mr. Pugh to come back on again. It was hilarious. But Clapton was, he was out here, absolutely out here. Both times in Glasgow, one time is better than the other, but one time is pretty awful. I'd class it as one of the worst gigs that I've seen. But yeah, check out Key to the Highway. And I guess Gilmour's got to come in somewhere, Dave Gilmour. Classic sound, classic guitarist, Pink Floyd, 70s stuff for me, is just the best, isn't it? Some absolutely classic albums in there. You take Animals, Dark Side of the Moon, Who Do You Think You Are? That's kind of the 3. That's the kind of trilogy for me of real incredible albums. Notice that I didn't like Medal. I'm one of the few people that actually like Amagala. I even like More, which is the soundtrack one that he did. But Dave Gilmour has such a unique guitar sound. It's instantly recognisable. As soon as he starts to play, he's sounded the same forever, but he's just amazing guitar player. And everybody kind of goes, the best solo is Comfortably Numb. And don't get me wrong, it's very good indeed. But I still think that Shine On You Crazy Diamond is my favourite solo that he's done. I think it's absolutely magnificent. The tone is fabulous. It's a properly iconic solo. Absolutely magnificent. The next person that I would like to put on the list is Carlos Santana. And, of course, Latin rock, wasn't it, really? All the percussion, just incredible percussion in Santana. And soaring guitar, just beautiful, great technical player. And I know it's obvious. And I know that you're going to go, oh God, I thought I was going to get something a bit more exciting than that. But Samba Pati, right, it's just one of the most beautiful songs. And I'll tell you, I'm not being funny, but if you can listen to Samba Pati and you don't go, right, and make guitar faces when he does these high bits, right, you're a better man than me, because I can't help it. I've actually got to do the guitar thing, amazing track. But I'll tell you a story. We went to see Santana very shortly after he had released Lotus, which was a triple live album. I think it was recorded in Japan. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, it's a triple live album, and I mean, amazing triple. Anybody that can put together a triple live album is, doing pretty well. And although there's some weak stuff on it, it's incredibly good. And we went to see him in Edinburgh very shortly after the album was released. And this is amazing, but that was the only concert that I've actually ever walked out. It was inexplainably soulless. In fact, we might have well just sat in the house and listened to the triple album, because he played it note for note. So the stuff on the album, when he does Samba Petit, for instance, and at the end of the first phrase, he does this sustain, which lasts for ages, right? So we're thinking this obviously he does different things at different gigs, but he did exactly the same. And after about half a dozen tracks, we were like going, God, this is really quite boring. And we did actually walk out. So that's I can't believe I'm saying that, but we actually did. So anyway, that was Carlos Santana. The next one might be a little bit controversial, because I know, for instance, I've talked about Andy Edwards. I know that Andy is an absolute unbelievable Frank Zappa fan, right? He knows everything about Zappa. He can name all the albums, all the people that played in them. I mean, he's like a font of knowledge, right? He knows everything, right? He's had hundreds of albums. How is it even possible? How is it possible to even listen to them all? There's so much material out there with Zappa. I don't deny at all. It was an absolute genius. And I love some of the live stuff, the kind of funky stuff. And they brought in George Duke, for instance, on keyboards. Love all that stuff. Really funky. And then he had some just totally unlistenable stuff. And then, so it was a real mishmash of stuff. I don't know how you're supposed to listen to it. But there's a track on an album called Weasels Ripped My Face, or Weasels Ripped My Flesh. I can't remember what it is. It's something like that. That was from the early 70s. And the track is called My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama. And I love that track. Somebody sent me a copy of the album, or somebody played me in their house. I can't remember, but I just loved that track. In fact, I love the album. The album's really, really good. And so he's a genius and a nutter all at the same time, which is kind of quite cool. I also saw Zappa back in the 70s. I think it was late 70s in Edinburgh. And you wouldn't get away with some of the stuff that he's done on stage. Like, no way. I mean, you got a girl out the was it Titties and Beer as a track? I can't remember. Anyway, got a girl out the stage, took her top off and was fondling her breasts as he was playing and singing in front of the crowd. Like, you'd be arrested now. You just could not get away with that shit, So anyway, Zappa was an extraordinary character. But this is My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama. Oh, one of my favourites, Jeff Beck. Oh my God! So Jeff came through again through the Yardbirds and through the 60s. Amazing stuff. The Jeff Beck group with Rod Stewart singing. Rough and Ready's one. It just was such a classic album. I absolutely love it. But oh my God, when he brought out Blow by Blow and Wired, just they absolutely blew my mind. They just, I was so taken by these two albums. His guitar playing and the tone he's playing was just magnificent in these albums. They were real groundbreaking jazz fusion albums at that point in time. Incredible bands, Max Middleton, Jan Hammer, I can't remember the other guys, but just fantastic musicians, fantastic bands. And I've got to be honest with you, I could have picked absolutely any track, I mean literally any track off 2 albums to play for you, but because we've ended as lovers from Blow by Blow, it's just that level above. It's one of the most beautiful guitar solos I think you'll ever hear, and I love it. Now again, we saw Beck I think 3 times in recent years, and we saw him just before he died. I'm so glad we saw him just before he died. There's a story about this concert as well, because we saw him maybe 5-6 years ago in Glasgow, and he was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. He had Vinnie Colaiuta on drums, and I can't remember her name, but he had Prince's bass player, the girl, amazing, and he played a blinder of a show. It was so good. So anyway, we had bought tickets for him, but it was cancelled during COVID. And then it was cancelled again, rescheduled and cancelled again. And then eventually, 2 or 3 years later, we finally managed to go and see him in Glasgow. And it was 70 quid a ticket or something, right? He was playing, it was fantastic. He played about 6 songs and he was just magnificent. And then Johnny Depp came on. This is the day after Johnny Depp had just had his thing with Amber, whatever her face was, right? In the court case, right? And he flew up to Glasgow and he came on as Jeff's, guest. Now, Jeff manages to play the entire set with one guitar, right? Johnny Depp come on, he turned it into like a pub sing-along, right? It was terrible. There was people, yeah, get off, right? So the fans weren't happy at all. I think we paid 70 quid to see one of the most legendary guitar players in the world, and we ended up watching some pub bands, right, with Johnny Depp singing. And, he sang about 6 songs and he changed his guitar 6 times, right? Fucking twat, right? Anyway, so that was my Jeff Beck story. But this is because we've ended as lovers. Okay, we can't do this without Brian May. Brian had such a unique sound. Brian had such a unique technique. Phenomenal technical guitar player. And I'm not going to go any further, just to say that, Queen were one of the greatest bands ever. Freddie Mercury had a range of voice that just people would have died to have. And yeah, I'm going to be very obvious here and say Bohemian Rhapsody. I think the solo in Bohemian Rhapsody is unique. It's phenomenal. It's one of the greatest tracks ever recorded. And again, I just wonder. I talked about Stairway to Heaven not being recorded. I wonder nowadays if a 6-minute record with a long introduction and all that kind of stuff would even be played today. Now, it probably would, because obviously Queen are a huge name now, but I just wonder if they weren't a huge name and they came out with that song, whether it would actually be accepted now. I don't know. In these days, these horrible days. Angus Young, come on, let's talk about Angus. AC/DC. I mean, the man's still wearing shorts. What age is he? He must be about 90 or something, right? He's still wearing shorts, still touring, right? He's still a schoolboy. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. He's a legend, right? And a whole lot of Rosie. Oh my goodness. There's loads of songs I could have picked, of course. They're an iconic band. They've got instantly recognisable. However many songs you play, wow, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that. But A Whole Lot of Rosie has got an absolutely blasting solo. I love the little teases he does at the beginning of the solo and then just absolutely blasts into it. It's such a wonderful, wonderful track. And AC/DC are touring at the minute as well, so but apparently tickets are pretty pricey. But yeah, Angus Young. Well, I suppose I must talk about a couple of prog bands because we've done Pink Floyd, and I'm going to go for the other huge one, which is, of course, yes, Steve Howe. Steve Howe, absolutely phenomenal, phenomenal guitar player. And even although after the 70s, to me, they really, personally, I don't think it really did anything worth listening to. But, you know, the Yes album, Fragile, close to the edge, classics. I mean, they are classics. Even though John Anderson's voice is just, yeah, it's a wee bit annoying sometimes, right? But the track that I've chosen is something a little bit unusual. So it's the Mood for a Day, which is on Fragile, and it's the acoustic solo, and his acoustic guitar playing is just fantastic, and it just shows you that legendary guitar players don't just have to be shredding and doing all the fancy stuff all the time. They can be just beautiful guitar players, intricate, you know, acoustic, fabulous playing, and the playing on this track, I think, is just magnificent, absolutely magnificent. The next one on the list for me is a phenomenal musician, phenomenal arranger, and a pretty decent songwriter, Mick Ronson. And Mick could do anything. He was quite incredible. He came to fame, of course, with the Spiders, David Bowie and the Spiders from Mars. And you may expect that the track that I'm going to pick is probably something from Bowie, and I probably could have, to be honest. But I love Lou Reed's Vicious, which I think he produced it. Mick Ronson produced it, and I think the solo on it, which he plays, is fantastic. Unfortunately, some of the solo is kind of hidden a little bit because Lou Reed's singing over the top of the solo. Which makes the song's great, right? But I'd love to have heard more of the solo as opposed to the kind of singing over the top of it. But it's a really absolutely sparkling solo and a really excellent piece of work. Yeah, I love Mick Ronson. Loved his style. Absolutely fantastic. Another of my absolute favourites. Going I remember going from school at lunchtime with my buddies, and we used to. I lived quite near. I was sort of 20-minute walk or 15-minute walk from school. So at lunchtime, we used to go and buy our big Swiss rolls for our lunch. You know, it wasn't particularly healthy, but with chocolate Swiss roll, whole one for lunchtime. That's why I'm the size I am just now. So we had a whole chocolate, and then we used to go to my house. Mum and Dad were working, and we used to go into the bedroom, and maybe 4 or 5 of us. And I used to go, look what I've got, have a listen to this. So I remember one of them being Rory Gallagher live in Europe. And he was just one of the most extraordinary guitar players, slide guitar players. The energy and the passion on every single Rory track is just it's off the stratosphere. It's absolutely incredible. He had an exuberance and a passion for playing live, and that really comes across in live in Europe and the Irish Tour 74. I think the live stuff with Rory is amazing, and there's some amazing clips on YouTube. There's one in particular which was and I can never find it because there's so many, but there's one in particular which was in a television show in France, and he does the most incredible solo. It's an incredible track. I wish I could remember what it was, but I can't. And all the crowd from the stage, who are all standing about, all get up on the stage. So the bands are kind of hidden by dozens and dozens of people. It's such an epic. And he then climbs up on the stacks and he's playing up. Oh, it's so good. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description below. But absolutely love Rory. And my favourite track off Live at Europe is Bullfrog Blues. Where did you ever? Right, so that was the great impression of Rory, but anyway, that was so Bullfrog Blues. Absolutely love it, and the slide in it is epic, superb. I'm moving on now to one of my absolute favourite guitar players. Sadly dead. Tommy Bolin. Oh my God. Bolin blew my mind. So he first blew my mind when I bought Billy Cobham's Spectrum album. And when I put that first track on, Quadrant 4, I literally had to just keep playing it. I don't think I heard the rest of the album for a week. I just played Quadrant 4 for forever. Mind blowing. And I could easily have picked that track as being Tommy's greatest solo. And it's certainly, jazz fusion at its absolute best. But Tommy had so many strings to his bow. He's a guitar player's guitar player. He started off in Sioux City in a band called Zephyr, and he played with them, 60s, early 70s. Joined the James Gang, lead guitar player. Absolutely fantastic tracks he did with that. He then did the jazz fusion kind of stuff, and with Billy Cobham, and then of course Richie Blackmore left Deep Purple, and Tommy was drafted in because Coverdale had heard Spectrum by Billy Cobham, and he got Tommy in to do a rehearsal or a trial or whatever you call it anyway. So and he was drafted into the band, and the first album that they recorded was Come Taste the Band, I think. Oh, I just love that album. I think Hughes and Coverdale, the kind of the voices, the soul-y thing, it's just fantastic. And Tommy was magnificent. And Getting Tighter, one of the tracks on that album, it's got to be one of the greatest starts to any rock song. It just makes me brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I love that. And then Tommy made 2 solo albums. One was called Teaser and one was called Private Eyes, and both of them are utterly magnificent albums, really, really magnificent albums. And the track that I'm going to pick is something that you might not expect I'm going to pick, but it's a track off a Teaser, and it shows another side to Tommy. And this is Savannah Woman. And Savannah Woman, just as a point of interest, was co-written by Phil Collins, believe it or not. And it's this kind of just sort of tropical, I don't even know how you would describe it. And then the solo in it's just so crisp and so beautiful. And so this is the power that Tommy had. Tommy could turn his hand to really any type of music and make it sound amazing. So if you have never heard Teaser and you've never heard Private Eyes, please check them out because they are stunning. So this is Savannah Woman. We'll talk about another jazz fusion player right now, and that is Al Di Meola. Now, I could mention Al Di Meola, I could mention Schofield, I could mention John McLaughlin. There's loads and loads of brilliant jazz fusion players, but Al Di Meola was, I think, very, very special to me. He was in Return to Forever, of course, with Chick Corea. He's had a fantastic career. And I guess what you would describe him as, he would probably be described best as a jazz rock shredder, you know. He'd be fantastic. But when he picked up an acoustic guitar, oh my God, he was incredible. So there's a track on his album called Elegant Gypsy called Mediterranean Sundance, and it's Spanish guitar sounding influence. And it's played with absolute razor sharp precision. It's just really beautiful guitar playing. He's just one of the great guitarists. And his album that he did with Paco de Luca and John McLaughlin, the three of them are playing acoustic guitar. Man, that is so worth hearing. It's one of the greatest acoustic guitar albums I think you'll ever hear. And then Robin Trower. Robin Trower, what a guitar player. In fact, I'm going to see him. I've got tickets for him this year. I'm very excited about that. I saw him a couple of years back, actually, a couple of years, I'm a liar. It was a good few years ago I saw him in the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh. And he was playing with a trio. He was playing with Jack Bruce, believe it or not. Yeah, that Jack Bruce. He was playing with Jack Bruce and Gary Husband. Oh my God, Gary Husband is a phenomenal drummer. And in fact, we went to see John McLaughlin a couple of years back, and Gary was the drummer and keyboard player on that. So he had another drummer, the famous one, I can't remember his name, and Gary was playing keys, and then for a few tracks he came on and did double drum kit with this. Phenomenal drummer. But anyway, that was a great gig. But in the 70s, Robin was at his absolute peak, and he recorded the album Bridge of Sighs, and some of the solo work on Bridge of Sighs is magnificent. But the one guy in that album that really makes it is a guy called the lead singer, bass player and lead singer, Dewar. Oh, what's his name? Anyway, somebody Dewar. It'll come up at the bottom of the screen there. Phenomenal, right? So Bridge of Sighs is magnificent. I love his playing. I love his tone. He had a sound totally unique. That's all I'm going to do just now, right? But there's so many I've missed out. As I say, John McLaughlin. the guy who played the solo one, Hotel California by the Eagles, I can't remember his name. Leslie West from Mountain. Oh my God, we could keep going on and on about the great guitar players of the 1970s. So anyway, listen guys, please, if you enjoyed that video, right, I urge you, because I've only got 42 followers and I'm feeling really bad, right? So I urge you to subscribe to the channel. We'll get more of this content on. Like the video for me if you would, please, because that helps. You know, YouTube see the people like it and then they push it to other people who like music shit, you know. I've actually really enjoyed doing this. This is great. So when I'm staying in a hotel room or I'm staying in my camper van or whatever, I've got absolutely bugger all else to do. So I might as well do something useful, useless. That might be right. It's a Freudian slip there. I might as well do something useful like this. So anyway, I've enjoyed speaking to you. Hopefully I've introduced a few different guitarists to you, a few different bands. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye for now.